If you're old enough to remember when phones had cords and the only thing that went viral was a cold, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Big 6-0 with Kaylee Harris and Guy Rawlerson. Because who better to discuss life's second act than two people who still think mature is a type of cheese?
Well, it's Good Friday, so today means a lot to this week's guest, and we're joined by the Reverend Bill Crews from the Exodus Foundation in Sydney. Bill, g'day, welcome.
G'day.
Most Australians will be familiar with the extraordinary work that Bill does, but a bit of background for our listeners in other parts of the world. Bill is a Christian minister at the Uniting Church. He's the minister at the Ashfield Parish in Sydney's inner west. But he was born in England and migrated to Australia in his early years and, believe it or not, studied electrical engineering at the Uni of New South Wales before, in late 1969, he first visited the Wayside Chapel in King's Cross and became involved in their voluntary programs. So by 1971, he decided to quit engineering and work full-time at the Wayside Chapel, and he was a member of the team that created the first 24-hour crisis centre in Australia, which is extraordinary. And in 1978, with the late Ted Knopfs, they created their first life education centre that have since spread all over the world, Hong Kong, Thailand, New Zealand, England, America, promoting drug avoidance and harm minimisation strategies. And then he joined the Uniting Church and became a minister in Ashfield, where he started the famous Exodus Foundation. We'll get Bill to explain what Exodus is in a second. It's best known, though, for its free restaurant called the Loaves and Fishes Restaurant, which feeds hundreds of people every day. Bill, I could just take up the whole half an hour talking about your extraordinary life, but I want to bring you in now and say hello and thank you for your time.
Oh, it's an honour, Kaylee, an honour.
Now, when you joined the Uniting Church, what made you do that? What made you take that calling?
Well, I'd been at the Wayside Chapel for 13 years and I got the feeling, it's time to move on sort of thing, but I didn't have any money or anything like that. So I looked around and the only church I found that would pay student ministers was the Uniting Church. So I thought that's the one.
So if the Catholics had paid...
maybe. The Catholic Church is the mother of us all, and I like it. But I'd be a bit difficult for me at times to sign the pledge.
But an electrical engineer, should I use the dad joke and say what sparked the moving from circuits and systems through to compassion and community?
Well, I happened one day, I didn't think I was the world's greatest engineer, but I was probably better than I thought I was. And I was doing a lot of research, and all the time through university, I'd be getting high distinctions for English and philosophy and all that, and passing all the engineering things. And I happened one day to end up at the Wayside Chapel in King's Cross. And honestly, I'd never seen anything like it in the world. It had homeless people, it had runaway kids, it had hippies, it had people like Sir Robert Helpman. There were the high and the low and the everything, all muddled up together. And it was at the time when King's Cross was in a lot of transformation. And I just found I'd found home. And I started visiting shut-in old ladies who were being terrorised by developers and all of that. And there were all these kids on the street, all these kids, many of them abused by priests and nuns and God knows what else and institutions and all of that. And I couldn't, in all honesty, not stay there. I couldn't because most of the institutions that have been set up to help those people in a way didn't or allowed the abuse to go on. And I felt I've got to stay. As simple as that.
And when was that? How long ago was that?
1971.
Wow.
It was a
1971.
different Australia then, wasn't it? In 1971.
Yeah. Well, there was still hangover and things from World War II, so that a lot of the homeless people were returned servicemen who had suffered, and were on the grog and all of that. And a lot of the kids, this is one of the untold stories, a lot of the kids were, when a lot of the soldiers went away, right, their wives and girlfriends got boyfriends.
Mm.
And so when the soldiers came back, what do you do with the kids? So they put them in homes. That's one of the big untold stories.
And you're right, whether it was the Second World War, whether it was Korea, whether it was Vietnam, there must have been a multitude of stories and change. And as we say, 71 was so long ago now.
Oh.
And society has changed, but the problems haven't really, have they?
The problems haven't changed. And in lots of ways, it was a time of change, but the change got paralysed so that a lot of the dreams of that time didn't really come to fruition,
So you go to Ashfield and you're the minister there at the church. How did the Exodus Foundation get its name, and how did it come about, and what did you want to achieve?
I'd watched Ted Noffs a lot, and he got charged with heresy and all this sort of stuff. And I thought if I did exactly the opposite, the church wouldn't give me a hard time, which is not true. There was no money, so I had to earn my own salary and all of that sort of stuff. So I had to go out and get a high profile, and I needed a high profile because that protected me from the bureaucrats in the church. And it was on the main road between Sydney and Melbourne. So there were all the hitchhikers and all the poor people and all the people. And also at the cross, I'd been taking in all these homeless kids. So I just started doing that at Ashfield. And before long, kids started turning up because I remember talking to the railway police at King's Cross at Central Station, and they started bringing kids that night. And we got nothing, so we slept them in the church and just did what we could. You just do what you do. You got to do it, Mm. And we just opened the church up, slept the kids on the pews. I had 10 old ladies, lovely old Methodist ladies, who called one another miss and all wore hats to church, most of them old maids, and they helped me. I kept saying, "You don't know what you got here." And they said, "That's all right." And it turned their lives around, One of them said to me a while ago, years ago, she said, "We were just a bunch of old gals going out backwards." She said, "And you came along and there's homeless kids and people out of jail and this and that and the other, and well, I can't die yet." It's so interesting. Like, it turned their lives around.
How did you fund those activities? How did you fund feeding these kids?
Always begged for money.
Begged who?
Whoever would listen. Whoever would listen. Singo, I wrote a letter to Singo, and he turned up one morning and he had this paper bag with all this money in it. And he said, "I just won it on the horses."
Oh.
So I took that. Then there was an old gal wrote me a letter, and she said, "You're not to ring me, you're not to write to me, you're to have no contact with me at all, because here's $10,000. This was 30-odd years ago. Here's $10,000, and when my family find out, they're going to be really angry with me." So it just happened.
Yeah. And so this evolved more or less by itself.
Yes.
Just word of mouth got out.
Energy of itself, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've been feeding the homeless and supporting the vulnerable for decades now.
Yeah.
What's changed and what hasn't?
What hasn't is the cries of the people in suffering. That hasn't changed at all. I think at the moment this world is less kind in a way than it was. I could go and bang on the doors of politicians or get on the radio or get in the newspaper and say, "This is going on, and the government's got to do something," and they'd respond. Now they just punch back. They punch back. And that's really difficult to deal with, because you present them with issues that they need to deal with and they'll punch back.
And in a country like Australia, where are we falling short as far as giving? Because we're a country, we're a rich nation. We're in a reasonable position to help. Where are we falling short?
We've got people who have got billions and billions and billions of dollars, and people who've got the bum out of their pants. And it's almost like the twain shall never meet. And I think we've allowed that gap between the rich and the poor to get too great. And I think people used to think that there was an end to, call it greed, but you find people can never make enough money. They might have $1 billion, but then they want 2 or they want 5, or the human greed is bottomless, and the only way we balance that is through taxation. But the people in authority or the people with leverage make sure that the taxation doesn't cover what's needed. You would only have to impose a tax on the world's wealthiest people of like 1%, and you would solve the poverty problem in the whole world. So it's actually distributing some of that wealth. Mm. It's that simple. It's that simple. And yet we won't do it, and we'll give millions and millions in salaries to people, and yet we won't say, well, you got enough.
So on those hard days, what is it that keeps you going?
I was sitting in my restaurant day before yesterday, and I sit there and often have lunch with all the guests, and I'll talk about that later, but and this woman comes up to me and there's tears streaming down her face, and she says, she's a refugee from Syria, and she says, can you help my family? She said, because, there's all these internecine wars going on there between one side and the other, and I don't know what side she was on or what side or any. She said, they've been murdering my family. They're murdering my family. And they murdered the little children the other night, and can I bring the rest? Can you help me bring the rest to Australia? And you think, yes, I'll do what I can. It's that. It's basically that.
So what do you do in that situation, Bill? Would you approach the government?
Yeah, we approached the government, and one time, right, this was the power of the little old ladies, because they all prided themselves on being non-political, which meant the Liberal Party held all its meetings in our church, And there was a little boy we'd found who was going to be deported. And these old gals, right, said to me, you go and see Philip Ruddock. He was the minister at the time. You go and see that Philip Ruddock, because he'd spoken at the Liberal Party meetings in the church. You go and see him and you tell him, if that boy is deported, we will lie on the tarmac and the plane will have to run over our bodies.
You would have loved that.
Oh, it was gorgeous. And these old gals, gosh,
How do you, Bill, how do you stay positive with the pain that you see from the people that you see every day at the Loaves and Fishes restaurant? I remember one story you told me a few years ago of 2 men came into the restaurant, and one of them ate and the other one didn't. And at the end of the first guy eating, he took out his false teeth and gave them to the other guy so he could eat. And how do you...
It's resourcefulness. That's
it is.
Real resourcefulness,
Yeah, but it's extraordinary stuff that most people don't get to see when you're exposed to this every day. How do you stay positive, and how is that what drives you?
Because it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
The care and the love. And look, I'll go right. I was in Calais, France in I don't know, 10 years ago, nearly 10 years ago, where all the refugees were trying to get to England, and there's 15,000 of them in this huge refugee camp. It's terrible place. They're terrible places, refugee camps, terrible. And I'm there, and I see a sign which says NA meeting, Narcotics Anonymous, and I thought, I wonder how they do that here. So I go into an area which is as big as this, really, with a bit of carpet on the floor, there's wood and plastic and snow and dirt and terrible. And sitting in that, in a circle, were maybe 10 or 12 people, men and women, Middle Eastern, Asian, African, all different, all drug addicts, mainly Muslim, all in the depths of despair, trying to get out of drug addiction. In our terms, the lowest of the low. They were, you tick it off, refugees, get rid of them, you know. Muslims, problem, you know. Drug addicts, problem. Boom, boom, boom. Sitting in a circle, all telling their story. That's what the NA does, you know. And they're all talking different languages and everything, but you could read it all on their faces. You didn't need to understand the words. And it gets to me. And I think, oh, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And I said, oh, I'm Bill from Australia. And they go, English, English. I say, no, I can't get you to England. I can't get you to England. And then it all poured out because it was a personal, really hard time for me. And I said, oh, I'm Bill from Australia. I said, and I've had 2 failed marriages. I said, and my kids have suffered from that. And I'm feeling really bad about that, blah, blah, blah. And they all got up and they all hugged me.
Oh, wow.
These people who had nothing gave me my life back in a way, you know. And I thought, I've got to honour that. So I went back to England and I threw out all my clothes and I just wear black in the hope people ask me, why do you wear black all the time? And I'll tell them that the people who had the least or had nothing gave me my whole life back. And I learned from that the more stuff you've got in your life, the less you can give of yourself to somebody else. And that's where it all goes. And I learned that after I was 70. It took me all those years to learn that. Then a few years later, my son had a huge psychotic breakdown, you know, and he's in hospital in a really bad way. And I'm going and visiting and haranguing the doctors, all of that, doing what a father should do, right? And I look around. It was a public hospital. I look around and I see most of the other people in that psychiatric ward were people we see every day at my foundation. And I suddenly realised they were the people who gave me my life back. They were the people that the real power lives in the powerless. The big, mighty people, they don't change the world. Powerless do. Powerless do.
Those broader societal reflections. We talk about there's a problem out there. How do you make people care about that problem out there when it doesn't directly affect them?
Because we've all got a dark side. We've all got a shadow side. We've all got areas that we don't want to look at in ourselves. And often those very sides are the sides that build the destructive side of the world to coming together, you know, like we believe the world's solid, and it's not. It's not. Like it struck me a while ago, you know, Jesus goes on and on and on saying, my kingdom is not of this world, you know, and people think about up there. But I suddenly realised it could be seen as a new way of seeing down here. It's down here. It's a new way of seeing down here, which is a world that's where people actually care for each other.
Do you think that will ever be a thing?
No, but I think we work towards it, and I hope what we are doing is a symbol that it could possibly one day perhaps maybe happen.
Do you think there's more good in the world than bad?
I think there's a balance. I think, like, I've just been, we do some work in Thailand, so I've been in the rainforest with the the Buddhist monks, you know, and they're isolated, and they spend all this time in the rainforest contemplating their navel and all of that. And I was thinking, gee, that's really lovely, but how is that going to stop the bombs falling? You know, so makes you think. You got to do it on the run, you know.
With Easter on us now, what does hope mean to Bill? And how do you help people find it if they don't have it?
Depends how you look on time. I think that really, if you, I do a lot of meditating, and when you meditate, every now and then you'll find that you're surrounded by a warm, loving glow. You know, a warm, loving glow, and I think that's at the core of all it is. There's a whole lot of thinking now that, you know, science used to say the end product of evolution will be consciousness, right? All these animals and all that gradually evolved to be conscious. But a lot of thinking now is that consciousness was there before anything, that evolution didn't drive consciousness. Consciousness drove evolution. So that coming up to Easter and there's the crucifixion and all that sort of stuff. The risen Jesus, we were told, the people recognised the risen Jesus by his wounds, right? But we are told the risen Jesus, whatever this kind of means, it means different things, is part of the Godhead, which says there's a wound at the heart of the Godhead that I think a lot of it's the way you think about things, you know, and if you think God's all perfect and all of that, then we fall really short. But if we're all working together, muddling through this existence, coming to consciousness, kind of makes it all a bit different, you know. It depends on how you look on things.
You talk about consciousness, and one of your good friends is the Dalai Lama. How did that relationship happen?
Oh, I don't know.
Because you would have met many famous people.
I got invited to. They asked me to welcome him to Sydney years ago, so I gave this speech, and he liked it. And afterwards there was, I think it was 10,000 people there, and I had to welcome him and made the speech. And afterwards he came up to me and he said, "Oh, that was really good, you know, really, really good." And he gave me this scarf and all these sorts of things. And so I just kept, we just kept bumping into one another. And then one time he was coming over here and I said, "Come and feed my homeless people." So he and we fed 400 homeless people and kids and God knows. And he loved it. He'd never done anything like that. And he got up before all of them and he said, "I'm homeless too." And it was such a powerful thing. I'm homeless, you know. Came into my church. I showed him all around the church. He took off his scarf and he put it around the cross, you know. Then he gives me this gift like a bit later. He says, "Take that as a gift from the Holy Spirit," you know. And he says, "Bill, what did he say?" I said, "You know," we were talking about it. I said, "That's really good Christian stuff." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "And you're a good Buddhist too." So, you know, I don't like words that try to put you into a box, because I think God, or all that is, or whatever you want to call it, is far bigger. The early Christians, the Romans, thought of the early Christians as atheists. And the reason they thought they were atheists was because they didn't have an idol. And you have to have an idol to pray to. So the Christians don't have an idol, so they're atheists. And you can't name the magnificence of all that is. Can't name it.
And you would have spoken, whether it's the Dalai Lama, you would have spoken and met hundreds and hundreds of people throughout your career, throughout your life. Is there one story or one something that sticks in your mind that's changed your view on the world or on Christianity or religion, or has impacted on your life personally?
I think Well, often it happens every Sunday morning, right? The one that I get a lot, I think of, well, there's a good few, but the one where the man was beaten up and by the side of the road and the religious people wouldn't touch him because it was a holy time and to touch him would mean they were impure. And they were so busy about keeping pure that they weren't pure, if you know what I mean. Those sorts of things turn me around. And sometimes our church service, because all the street people come and all of that, they hang by a thread. As you can imagine, there's a bit of chaos all the time. And I think, this is it. This is what it is. It's not all the bells and smells and everybody. I do a washing of the feet tomorrow for the homeless people, and we all wash our feet. And it's the most moving thing because as you wash somebody's feet, they tell you their life story. It's amazing.
And you're washing their feet.
Yeah.
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 So if you could get,
The old girls used to say, why don't you wear your robes?
Yeah.
I said, it's a real thing. It's not.
I'd like to think politicians and businessmen were among those, but if you could get those people into a room, knowing that you have to beg, borrow, and not necessarily steal money, but what would you say to them?
Well, often they're very transactional so that they don't get the wider bits. And I find that's really kind of sad. Like at the moment, there's all this Trump talk and all of that. And I'm saying we have a real opportunity to build a financial order that takes in account of the poor and the needy and the desperate. And we shouldn't, if we export our social capital, if we export our goodness, sales of widgets will happen anyway, because people, like the Colombo plan of 60 years ago is still such a huge, people still talk about all of that, you know, did such good. So if I could get them all in the room, I'd say export goodwill and the sale of the widgets will follow. It's not necessarily the other way round. Just if you just get transactional, then you end up like Trump and it can change overnight. But if you build good relationships, they'll last forever.
I'll just finish up if I can. What legacy do you hope to leave? I'm not talking about buildings or institutions, but probably in the hearts of people.
Listen to people. Often we can't hear what they say because there's too much chatter in our own heads. And what people say, we're examining ourselves a lot. I'd say listen to people and try and sit beside people. One of the reasons we've got such loneliness in the world is because we don't listen to one another anymore. And often we don't know who our neighbour is or anything like that. And so if people ring me up and say I'm lonely, I say get out of your room and talk to your neighbour. You know, I hope that's what would happen. I hope. What we've tried to do is build a community of people within which there are pockets of expertise, you know, and often you'll find with, call them charities, that they do all the expertise work, but bugger the community.
Reverend Bill Crews, thank you so much for your time on the Big
Thank
6-0 podcast.
Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed on the Big 6-0 are personal and reflect those of the hosts and guests. They do not represent the views or positions of any affiliated organisations or companies. This podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for guidance on any personal matters.
Oh, and before we go, let's give credit where credit is due. Kaylee Harris and I came up with all the genius content for this week's episode. Our producer, Nick Abood, well, he keeps the lights on and makes sure we don't accidentally upload a cat video instead of a podcast. So thanks for keeping us on track, Nick. Nick?